The Millionaire CEO and the Secret of Two Lives. Imagine leaving the love of your life due to family pressure, only for the truth to return 5 years later in the most impactful way. That's the story of Mateo Vargas, a millionaire CEO who 5 years ago broke up with the love of his life under pressure from his elitist parents. 5 years later, she reappeared with 2 children who were his spitting image. Mateo Vargas was a man the world admired. At 32, he was already the CEO of Vargas Innovations, a multi-billion-dollar tech empire built on artificial intelligence and cloud computing. He graced magazine covers, gave speeches at world summits, and shook hands with presidents. Every photo of him showed the same impeccable image. Perfectly styled golden blonde hair, piercing blue eyes that showed just the right amount of detachment, and a smile that could close deals before a contract was even read. He lived in a penthouse overlooking the city's great park. He drove a custom electric sports car and wore bespoke suits that were worth more than most people's rent. To anyone who saw him from the outside, he was flawless, determined, disciplined, and destined for greatness. But there was one thing Mateo didn't have, and for which he once almost risked everything: love. 5 years earlier, before he stepped into his role as CEO, Mateo had been with someone who didn't fit into the plan his family had laid out for his life. Her name was Sophia Beltran. She wasn't a socialite or a tech investor. She hadn't been born into wealth. She was an architecture student, paying for her degree with scholarships and part-time jobs, with paint stains on her jeans and notebooks filled with messy sketches. She had long brown hair, expressive blue eyes, and a way of looking at Mateo that made him feel like he was more than his title. With her, he didn't have to perform. With her, he laughed louder, slept better, and dreamed more freely. They met at a charity event he had only attended out of obligation. She was helping to set up stage lights, and he bumped into her while checking his phone. It was the most human moment he had had in months. Their relationship flourished in private. Long walks through the city, late-night takeout on rooftops, conversations about dreams and fears. She didn't care about his money. She teased him about his expensive watch and refused to let him pay for her rent. She made him feel real in a world where everything about him seemed curated. For the first time in his life, he imagined a future that didn't revolve around quarterly profits or board meetings. He imagined a small wedding, a cozy home, children with blue eyes and indomitable energy. He imagined Sophia in every version of that future, but his parents had other plans. When they found out about Sophia, the reaction was immediate and brutal. His father, Carlos Vargas, the chairman of the board and one of the coldest men Mateo had ever known, called him into his office and told him bluntly, "She is not your equal. She dilutes your image. Marry her, and we will begin the process of removing you from the succession." His mother didn't bother to hide her contempt either. "Do you really want to embarrass the family?" she asked. "What will the shareholders think when they see you with someone so average?" Mateo tried to resist. He fought. He told them he didn't care about perception. But Vargas Innovations wasn't just a company. It was an empire, passed down through 3 generations. His name was a brand. His face was an investment. And as the pressure mounted, from his family, the board, the advisors who reminded him of his obligations, Mateo felt the walls closing in on him. The worst part was that he never told Sophia the truth. One day, he simply ended it all, without explanation, without discussion. He said he needed to focus on his career and walked out of her apartment, leaving behind the woman he had imagined forever. Sophia called once, then twice. Then she stopped. He never answered. He buried himself in work and tried to convince himself that it had been necessary, that it was for the best. But not a single day went by that he didn't think of her, that he didn't see something that reminded him of the life he had left behind. He missed her laugh, the way she said his name when she was angry, the way she made him feel like a man, not a product. Still, he never reached out, because admitting he was wrong would mean facing everything he had given up. And in that moment, Mateo Vargas didn't know how to face regret. Not yet. What do you think of Mateo's decision to break up with Sophia? Was he a coward, or was he a victim of his circumstances? The beginning of a new life. Sophia Beltran had never believed in fairy tales, but falling in love with Mateo Vargas had felt dangerously close to one. For a brief time, it had been more than she had ever dreamed of. She remembered the warmth in his eyes when he looked at her, as if she were the only person in the world. She remembered the nights on the rooftop, when the city lights made the sky feel infinite, and Mateo would whisper to her about wanting to escape the world of cameras and boardrooms, just to live a normal life with her. She believed him. She believed every word, every unfinished promise in the spaces between kisses and silence. But one day, he was gone. No goodbye, no explanation, just a cold, carefully worded message that he needed space to focus on his future. She had waited for him to call. She tried to find him. She left a long, desperate voicemail, then another. But the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was deliberate. It was final. And so she stopped waiting. Sophia threw herself into her work, pouring her broken heart into blueprints and deadlines, trying to get lost in her studies. But only a few weeks later, she started to feel the changes in her body. The fatigue, the nausea, the missed period. She told herself it was stress. But when she took a pregnancy test and saw the result, her breath caught in her throat. She didn't cry. She just stood in the bathroom, staring at the word positive, as if it were written in another language. Then she sat on the edge of her bed and said nothing for a long time. The doctor confirmed her pregnancy, but the ultrasound revealed something she hadn't expected. 2 heartbeats. Twins. 2 lives growing inside her. 2 reminders of a man who had walked away without looking back. She considered calling him again. She imagined what she would say. But then she remembered the voicemail, the cold response from his assistant, the way he had vanished as if she meant nothing, and she knew she couldn't go through that again. So she didn't call. She didn't write. She deleted his number. She accepted, deep in her soul, that he wasn't coming back. Sophia decided to leave the city. There was no longer a place for her there. She took a job in a smaller town, at an architectural firm where no one asked questions about her past. She rented a modest apartment and lived carefully, saving every penny. The twin pregnancy was difficult, but she was tougher. She worked through swollen feet, sleepless nights, and the fear of being completely alone in the world. She took prenatal vitamins with food stamps. She skipped meals to pay for baby clothes, and when the time came, she gave birth to 2 healthy, beautiful boys. Liam and Samuel had blonde hair from the start, and the bluest eyes she had ever seen. It was like looking at 2 small versions of the man she had once loved. At first, it broke her heart to see Mateo in their faces. But with time, that feeling softened into something else, something more fierce. Love. Not for what could have been, but for what was. Her children were everything. They were wild, loud, messy, and perfect. They were the reason she got out of bed when her body ached and her bank account hit 0. She worked late. She took on freelance jobs. She drew blueprints for storefronts, cafes, and even barns. Anything that would keep the lights on. She fed her children. She clothed them. She kissed their bruises. And she read them bedtime stories, even when she was too tired to stand. Sophia never said Mateo's name, not once. When the boys asked why they didn't have a dad, she told them the truth, gently, that sometimes people leave because they are afraid of love, and that it isn't their fault or ours. She didn't talk about revenge. She didn't dwell on the past. She poured all her energy into raising two curious and brave boys who had no idea they carried a last name that once ruled a city. Do you think Sophia did the right thing by not telling Mateo about the twins? Would you have done the same? Or would you have tried to contact him again? The impossible reunion. The invitation arrived unexpectedly, tucked in Sophia's modest email inbox with a generic subject line. Architectural Futures Forum. Speaker selection. At first, she assumed it was a mistake. She had never presented at a major event, let alone in a big metropolis. But the message was real. They had reviewed her design proposal for a women's shelter, sustainable, low cost, and community-focused, and they wanted her to speak on the panel. It wasn't paid, but they covered travel and lodging. It was the opportunity she had dreamed of for years, and the kind of recognition she never thought she would receive as a single mother of two, struggling in the background of the architectural world. She hesitated for only a moment. Then she said yes. Returning to the city after 5 years felt surreal. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt familiar. She arrived with Liam and Samuel, two energetic 5-year-olds who asked non-stop questions on the flight, who gasped at the skyline and said the buildings looked like towers of Legos. She dressed them carefully for the forum, in small collared shirts and clean sneakers, and packed a bag full of coloring books and snacks to keep them occupied while she presented. She had no one to watch them, and she wasn't going to let that stop her. They sat patiently near the back of the exhibit space while she stood beside her shelter model, her palms slightly sweaty, her heart racing. The event was held in a downtown skyscraper, with glass walls that wrapped around the venue and sunlight spilling in. She tried not to think about the possibility of running into anyone she knew. The city was big. He wouldn't be here. Why would he be? Then she heard his voice. She was in the middle of answering a journalist's question when the voice, low, confident, and too familiar to ignore, cut through the air. She froze. Her stomach lurched before her eyes confirmed it. Mateo Vargas was less than 20 feet away, laughing softly with a group of sponsors in sleek suits. He hadn't changed. The blonde hair still immaculate, the posture as natural as ever, but older now, harder around the edges. His expression was calm until it landed on her. Sophia saw the moment he realized. First confusion, then shock, then something deeper. His eyes drifted past her, to the two children sitting on the floor behind her table, coloring quietly on the carpet. Time slowed. Mateo's face went pale, his gaze fixed on the twins, and Sophia could see the gears turning, fast and desperate. She didn't move. She didn't smile. She didn't look away. He walked toward her. She stood rigid, gripping the edge of the exhibit table as if it could anchor her to the floor. The people around them seemed to fade into a background noise. The city, the forum, the years, it all shrank to this impossible moment. He stopped in front of her, his voice barely audible. "Sophia." She didn't respond. He looked back at the children, then back at her, visibly shaken. "There," he started. She held his gaze. "Yes," she said, calm and low. "They're yours." He recoiled, stunned. For a moment, he looked like someone who had just been hit. "I didn't know," he said. "I had no idea." "I know," she replied, her voice firm. "I tried. You made sure I couldn't reach you." He blinked, trying to process everything. "But why didn't you try again?" Sophia laughed softly, bitter and weary. I did. I left messages, I sent letters. Your assistant told me not to call again. I assumed you had made your decision. Matteo looked down, the weight of the realization settling heavily on his face. He turned to look at the children, who still didn't know who he was. Liam looked up, smiled, and waved at him innocently. I need to talk to you, Matteo said, his voice slightly broken. Sophia crossed her arms. Now you want to talk? After 5 years? At a public event? He hesitated, then nodded slowly. Yes, I need to explain, and I need to understand. She stared at him for a long time. The hurt she had buried deep inside bubbled to the surface, but she didn't let him see it. Not here, not yet. You don't get to walk back into this as if nothing happened, she said. But if you truly want to understand, start by learning their names. Matteo looked at her, and something broke in his eyes. He turned to the children, knelt, and asked softly, What are your names? The twins looked at him, bewildered, but curious. I'm Liam, one said. I'm Samuel, the other added. What's your name? Matteo smiled sadly. I'm Matteo. They didn't recognize him. Why would they? Sophia watched from behind the table, her heart pounding. This was not the moment she had prepared for. She never thought it would come, and yet here they were. Not as strangers, not yet as a family. But something had started to change. The truth had finally come to light, and nothing would ever be the same. What do you think is the biggest emotion Matteo is feeling at this moment? Remorse, guilt, or genuine heartbreak? The slow road to redemption. Matteo didn't sleep that night. After the forum, after the longest, most jarring day of his life, he returned to his penthouse, a place that once felt like the pinnacle of success and now felt hollow, stripped of meaning. The image of the two boys lingered in his mind, haunting and vivid. Liam and Samuel. Their names echoed in his thoughts like a mantra he had never known he needed. He could still see their eyes, so familiar it ached in his chest, and the way they had looked at him without recognizing him. They didn't know him. They didn't know he existed, and that realization, more than anything else, broke him. The next morning, he requested a private DNA test. He didn't tell anyone, not his assistant, not his legal team, not his parents. This wasn't about legality. It was about something he couldn't name, something urgent and personal, as if he needed permission to believe the truth, even though every part of him already knew. The results came 3 days later, a 99% match. There was no denying it. He was their father. Matteo stared at the document in silence for a long time. Then he folded it carefully and tucked it into a drawer, as if it were something sacred and heavy. Not a piece of paper, but a door that had just opened. A door he had unknowingly locked from the outside, 5 years ago. He contacted Sophia through the event coordinator, careful not to be too pushy. She agreed to meet with him, once, at a small cafe in the Lower East Side. No lawyers, no assistants, just them. She arrived with her usual quiet strength, dressed simply, her hair pulled back. She looked tired, but serene, and more beautiful than he remembered. Life had shaped her in new ways, adding a gravitas to her gaze that hadn't been there before. He stood as she walked in. She didn't smile. They sat across from each other, two people with years of pain between them, and two children who connected them forever without knowing it. For a long moment they said nothing. The noise of the cafe hummed around them, clinking cups, steaming milk, quiet conversations. I have the results, Matteo finally said. They're mine. Sophia nodded. I know. He ran a hand through his hair, struggling to find words that meant enough. I don't know what to say to you. She looked at him, her eyes clear. Then don't say anything you don't mean. I mean everything now, he said. Sophia, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I believe you, she said. But that doesn't erase what happened. He looked down, shame washing over him. I wanted to fight for you. I was going to. But my parents, the board, it all came crashing down. I didn't know how to be the man they expected and the man you needed. You chose them, she said, without malice. You walked away. He nodded slowly. I did, and I had to raise them without you, she continued. While you were building empires, I was building cribs. While you were giving speeches, I was trying to make enough for dinner. Mateo flinched. Her words weren't cruel. They were just true, and they hit harder than he could have anticipated. I'm not asking for forgiveness, he said. Not yet. I just want a chance to know them, to be a part of their lives, even if it's just in a small way. Even if it's just... He paused, his voice cracking. I can't go back, Sophia, but I can show up now. I can try. She studied him carefully. They don't know you. They don't even know what a father is. To them, I am their whole world. I don't want to take anything from you, he said quickly. I just want to add to what you've built. Sophia exhaled slowly. They're 5 years old. They don't understand betrayal or loyalty, but they understand presence. You don't get to pop in and out. You don't get to start and stop. If you want to be in their lives, you have to be in it for good. I am, he said without a beat of hesitation. Whatever it takes. She nodded, still guarded, but something in her posture softened. Then you'll start small. Pick them up from school one day. Come to the park. Sit with them. Let them come to you. If they ask questions, answer them honestly. If they run from you, don't chase. Just be there. Mateo nodded, humbled. Okay, I can do that. As they walked out of the cafe, they didn't part with hugs or promises, just with an understanding, a fragile agreement between two people who were no longer in love, but were forever connected. Sophia walked ahead, and Mateo followed her at a respectful distance, not as a couple, not yet as a father, but as a man, finally trying to fix what had once gone so terribly wrong. How difficult do you think it was for Sophia to agree to Mateo's proposal? What do you think Mateo will do now to rebuild trust? The father who came back, Mateo's first visit to the children's school, was nothing like the corporate events he was used to. There were no sleek suits, no rehearsed speeches, no executives to impress. Instead, there were sticky handprints on the classroom walls, paper airplanes flying down the hallway, and the unmistakable chaos of 20 children navigating their small universes. Mateo stood near the school door in a casual sweater and jeans, awkward and unsure of where to put his hands. He had reviewed multi-billion-dollar acquisitions without breaking a sweat, but waiting to pick up his children who didn't even know they were his, made him feel like a nervous teenager. Sophia had arranged it carefully. She told the boys a friend would pick them up and take them to the park. No labels, no explanations, just a chance for them to get to know him on neutral ground. When Liam and Samuel came bursting out of the school doors, Mateo recognized them instantly. Their blonde hair shone in the sunlight, and their identical blue eyes lit up when they saw him, even if they didn't quite understand who he was. He knelt, unsure of the script. Hi, I'm Mateo. Your mom asked me to take you to the park today. Is that okay? The boys looked at each other, then at him. Liam tilted his head. Are you the man from the building with all the people in suits? Mateo smiled. Yes, that was me. Samuel squinted. Do you have snacks? Mateo laughed. Yes, lots. That was enough. They took his hands without hesitation and led him away, chattering about dinosaurs and spaceships, and how Liam's teacher said Pluto wasn't a planet anymore, which he thought was totally unfair. Matteo listened to everything, responding where he could, but mostly just absorbing them. Their voices, their expressions, their unfiltered, absolute joy. It was overwhelming in the best possible way. At the park, they ran to the swings, and Matteo sat on a nearby bench, watching them. For a few minutes, he allowed himself to pretend that this had always been his life, that he had always been there for them, on days like this, in moments like this. But that illusion broke when Samuel fell from the slide and bumped his elbow. He didn't cry right away. He just stood still, his eyes wide and bright, trying to decide if the pain was worth it. Matteo rushed over without thinking, crouching down and gently checking his arm. "Are you okay?" he said in a low voice. "It's not bleeding. It's just a bump." Samuel blinked. "You're like Mommy." Matteo paused, then said softly, "I'm trying to be good at this." Samuel leaned into him for just a second, and that small gesture nearly broke Matteo in two. He looked up and saw Liam standing nearby, watching carefully. There was something calculating in his gaze, not suspicion exactly, but a quiet evaluation. Matteo knew that look. He had used it himself, long ago, when trying to decide if someone was safe. Liam finally came closer. "Are you coming back?" Matteo met his eyes, his gaze steady. "Yes, I'm coming back." Liam nodded once, as if he was satisfied. Then he was off and running again, calling to Samuel to chase him. Matteo stayed there for a moment longer, trying to catch his breath. That one question, "Are you coming back?" had felt heavier than any contract he had ever signed. But his answer had come out truthfully. He would. Over and over again. The visits continued, quietly and consistently. Matteo showed up for school pickup, at the park, at classmates' birthday parties he didn't know. He learned what shows they hated, what superhero was cool at the moment, and how to separate them when they fought over the same Lego piece. He learned to get down on his knees and really listen, to put his phone away, to simply be there. With time, the boys grew used to him. They laughed more. They called him by his name, with a little more familiarity. Liam started to ask questions. "Did you know my mom when she was young? Do you live in a really big house? Why don't you have any children?" Matteo answered honestly and carefully. He never rushed them. He never tried to earn something they weren't ready to give. One afternoon, while walking them back to Sophia's apartment, Samuel reached for his hand without being asked. Liam did the same. Then he looked up and asked, "Why are you always smiling when we talk?" Matteo looked down at both of them, their cheeks flushed from running, their matching backpacks bouncing with each step. "Because I'm lucky," he said simply. "I get to be here with you." Sophia was waiting at the door, her arms crossed, unsure. She always watched him closely after each visit, as if trying to gauge whether he had earned another. But this time, something changed. She watched the boys run inside, laughing, telling her about the swings and how Matteo almost fell, trying to race them. And then she looked at him. "You didn't leave today," she said in a low voice. "You stayed even when Samuel got scared. You stayed even when Liam fell." Matteo nodded. "I told them I would." Sophia looked down, then back at him. "Keep doing that." And just like that, without grand gestures or emotional speeches, the wall between them came down. It wasn't gone, but it was thinner. And Matteo knew that this wasn't about being forgiven in one moment. It was about showing up in hundreds of them. And he would. Every single time. What do you think is the biggest factor in Matteo starting to regain Sophia's trust? The words that change everything. Matteo hadn't expected the word to come so soon. It had been almost 3 months since he started seeing Liam and Samuel regularly. He never missed a visit. He was never late. He learned to sit in silence when they were in a bad mood, to participate when they asked for help with puzzles, and to listen when they just needed to talk, even if what they were saying didn't make much sense. He had been careful not to push too fast. He had accepted the fact that, for now, he was just Matteo, the man who brought good snacks, played tag without checking his phone, and laughed at their jokes even when they didn't make sense. But something had changed. It was a Saturday afternoon. Sophia had an interview for a new design contract and asked Matteo if he could watch the boys for a few hours. He agreed immediately, and she dropped them off at his apartment, which he had recently made kid-friendly, even though he never thought he would need to. Toys now lived in wicker baskets in the living room. A small table with crayons and construction paper sat near the window. The fridge was full of juice boxes, string cheese, and the kind of sugary cereal he didn't approve of, but bought anyway, because they loved it. That afternoon, they built an elaborate pillow fort between the couches, complete with tunnels, and a command center made of old shoeboxes and flashlights. Liam declared himself captain. Samuel insisted on being the science officer because he had brought a magnifying glass. Matteo played along as Commander Dad, a name Samuel made up in the middle of their game, and said without thinking. Matteo froze for a second, taken aback by the word. Dad. He didn't respond immediately, afraid that if he reacted too much, Samuel would take it back. So he just smiled and continued the game. But inside, he was a mess of emotions. The word kept echoing in his mind. He hadn't earned it yet. Or maybe he had, slowly, in pieces. Not through grand gestures, but through consistency, time, and quiet love. Later that night, after they had eaten takeout and were lying under the pillow, fort watching cartoons, Samuel curled up next to him and looked at him. "Can I call you Dad now, or do I have to wait?" Matteo felt a knot form in his throat. He looked at Samuel's small, serious face, then at Liam, who was also watching him, silently holding his favorite dinosaur plush. Matteo reached out and pulled both of them closer. "You can call me whatever you feel is right," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "But if you want to call me Dad, I would be very proud of that." Samuel nodded. Liam gave him a small smile, the kind that says more than words. That night, Sophia came to pick them up. She found them asleep on the couch, Samuel lying on Matteo's chest, Liam curled up beside him, both of them snoring softly. Matteo had fallen asleep too, his arm protectively around both of them, the television still on low. She didn't wake them up right away. She just stood there for a long moment, watching. Something inside her, something that had been locked away, began to shift. She saw how Matteo held them as they slept, as if they had always been there. She saw how safe they looked, how peaceful. When she finally woke him, Matteo stirred slowly, blinking as he realized where he was and what time it was. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "We must have all fallen asleep." Sophia shook her head. They were happy. That's what matters. As he gently lifted the boys and helped her get them into the car, she looked at him. "Samuel called me Dad today," she said in a low voice. "He asked if it was okay." Sophia didn't speak right away. Then she looked at him and said, "He wouldn't have asked if he hadn't already felt it." The drive home was quiet. Matteo rode in the back seat with the boys, holding their hands as they slept. Sophia watched in the rearview mirror, and something inside her settled for the first time in a long time. The walls she had built to protect herself, understandable, necessary walls, began to come down. Not all at once, but piece by piece. That night, Matteo couldn't sleep. He lay awake in his penthouse, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the way Samuel had looked at him when he said the word Dad. It wasn't a title you could claim. It had to be given, earned. And now it had been. In the silence of that night, for the first time in years, Matteo felt complete. Not because of success, or wealth, or reputation, but because two small boys had decided to let him in. Not as a guest, not as a visitor, but as their father. What do you think is the deeper meaning behind Sophia's change of heart and Matteo's reaction to the name Dad? The choice to stay. Matteo hadn't planned on confronting his parents. He had avoided it for months, pushing down the urge whenever it arose, focusing instead on showing up for Liam and Samuel, on earning Sophia's cautious trust, on building something genuine from the pieces of the life he had once destroyed. But there came a point when silence no longer felt like strength. It felt like surrender. The deeper he got into fatherhood, the more he saw what he had almost lost forever, and the more unbearable it became to know that his parents had stolen it from him with a smile and a firm handshake. He had to confront them, not for closure, but for clarity. He needed them to see what they had done, and more importantly, what he would never allow them to do again. He arrived at the Vargas estate on a Sunday morning. It was exactly as he remembered it. Impeccably manicured, cold, and quiet. A place designed for appearances, not for comfort. His father greeted him in the library, sitting in the same leather chair where so many past conversations had been framed as lectures. His mother appeared moments later, as immaculate as ever, with an unreadable expression. "I'm surprised you came," his father said, clasping his hands together. "We didn't think we'd hear from you again." Matteo didn't sit. He stood near the fireplace, his posture quiet but unyielding. "We need to talk. About Sophia. About the children." His mother stiffened at the mention of her name. "We warned you about her years ago." Matteo turned to her, his voice sharp but controlled. "You didn't warn me. You lied to me. You blocked letters. You ignored calls. You told people to keep her away from me." His father's eyes narrowed. "We did what was necessary to protect your future. You were emotional, unfocused. You would have thrown away your entire legacy for a girl who had nothing." Matteo took a deep breath, fury rising in his chest. "That girl is the mother of my children, the children you never cared to know existed. She raised them alone, with nothing, and they turned out better than anything this family has ever produced." His mother stood up, her voice clipped. "Don't be dramatic. Do you think we haven't sacrificed for you, for this name, your success?" "My success," Matteo interrupted, "no longer has anything to do with this name. The company, the image, the money, none of it matters if it costs me my humanity. You tried to make me choose between love and legacy, and I listened. I walked away from the only real thing I had. But I won't make that mistake again." There was a heavy silence. His father leaned back, his tone suddenly colder, more strategic. "And now what? You're going to play house with some woman and pretend you're a family man? You think the world will buy that?" Matteo looked at him, disgusted. "I don't care what the world buys. I care what Liam and Samuel see when they look at me. I care what kind of man I am when I tuck them in at night. And I care about the woman who carried that weight when I left." His mother opened her mouth, but he didn't let her speak. "I'm not here to ask for your blessing. I'm here to tell you that your control ends here. If you can't accept my family, you won't be a part of our lives. That is your choice. But I'm done living under your version of success." They didn't respond right away. There was a fissure in the room, a visible fracture in the illusion of power they had always held over him. For the first time, Matteo wasn't the boy seeking approval. He was the man drawing the line. "I pity you," he added in a low voice. "You'll never know them. You'll never get to hear Liam explain how he thinks the moon controls feelings, or see the way Samuel draws his dreams. You'll miss it all, and one day you'll realize you traded your grandchildren for control." He turned and walked out, leaving them in their perfect, empty home. When he returned to his apartment, Sophia and the children were waiting. She looked up when he entered, reading his face in an instant. "Did you tell them?" she said. He nodded. "Everything." "And?" "They didn't take it well." Sophia walked over. "Do you regret it?" Matteo looked at his sons, who were building block towers on the floor, their laughter echoing through the room. "Not for a second," he said. That night, after the boys were in bed, Sophia handed him a small box. Inside was a photograph, one she had taken weeks ago when he wasn't looking. He was sitting on the park grass, Samuel in his lap, Liam leaning against his side, the three of them laughing heartily. She had had it printed, had it framed. A silent gesture. A thank you. A beginning. Matteo held the photo for a long time before placing it on the bookshelf next to the boys' art projects. He no longer needed validation from anyone but them. His family. His future. The life he chose. Finally. On his own terms. What do you think of Matteo's decision to confront his parents? And what does Sophia's small gesture mean to you? The final vow. Autumn in the city had a way of softening everything. The sharp angles of buildings blurred in a golden light. The traffic noise seemed softer, and even the wind had a kind of tranquility to it. For Matteo, the changing of seasons mirrored what was happening inside him. Something that had been cold for a long time had started to thaw, and in its place was a warmth he had once feared he didn't deserve. It had been almost a year since he found out about Liam and Samuel, and every day since had been a choice. He had chosen them. He had chosen Sophia. He had chosen to show up again and again, not as the perfect man, but as the present one. Life wasn't flawless, but it was full. His mornings started with spilled cereal, mismatched socks, and the chaos of getting two 5-year-old boys out the door. His nights ended with bedtime stories, and small hands curled into his shirt as they fell asleep beside him. His apartment had long since transformed from a sleek, lifeless bachelor pad into a warm, lived-in home where finger paintings covered the walls and tiny sneakers were always left near the door. The boys called him Dad now, without hesitation. Sometimes with excitement, sometimes with frustration, sometimes in whispers when they needed comfort. And each time, it still hit him with the quiet force of a wonder. Sophia had softened too. Not entirely. There were still moments when the weight of their history made her pull back a little. But those moments were fewer now, and always followed by something small but significant. A look, a hand on his back, an unfinished sentence, but an understood one. They had rebuilt trust not through dramatic apologies or grand gestures, but through the simple rhythm of shared responsibility and mutual care. He respected her more than ever, not only for raising the boys alone, but for doing it without letting her pain turn her bitter. She had every reason to shut the door on him forever, but she didn't. And that forgiveness, unspoken but felt, was the greatest gift he had ever been given. One Saturday morning, while the boys were playing in the living room and Sophia was making coffee in the kitchen, Matteo stood by the window with a small box in his hand. It wasn't velvet or brand name. It was simple, clean, and carefully chosen. Inside was a ring, delicate but strong. He had spent months thinking about how to ask her. At first, he imagined something big. Roses, photographers, some sweeping gesture with the city skyline behind them. But that wasn't their story. Their story had been rebuilt in quiet hours, in soft apologies, in hallways full of Legos and crayon-signed notes. He didn't need fireworks. He needed the truth. He walked into the kitchen and waited for her to look up. She raised an eyebrow at the seriousness of his face. "What's wrong?" she asked. Nothing, he said. That's the point. He took her hand and led her into the living room where the boys were still playing. They looked up, curious, but not surprised. Matteo knelt, and for a moment, everything around him faded into silence. I don't want to rewrite the past, he said. I just want to write the rest of the story with you, in it, as your partner, as the father of our sons, as the man who finally understands what it means to love completely and to show up completely. Sophia's eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. She was too strong for that. She smiled, small at first, then wider, and nodded. Yes, she said simply, because I don't need perfection. I just need you. The boys cheered, not entirely sure what had just happened. But sensing it was a good thing, they piled into his arms, throwing him off balance until they all tumbled into a laughing heap on the carpet. The wedding came a few months later. It wasn't extravagant. It didn't need to be. They held it in the small community garden Sophia had helped design years ago. Friends gathered, close and quiet, sitting among rows of late-blooming marigolds and ivy-covered fences. The boys wore matching vests and carried the rings, too excited to walk slowly down the aisle. Sophia wore a simple ivory dress, her hair loose with a daisy tucked behind one ear. Matteo couldn't stop smiling as she walked toward him, her step steady, her eyes locked on his. There were no fairy tale illusions. There were no promises of perfection, just vows spoken from the heart, short, honest, and unpolished. Promises to choose each other, not just on the bright days, but on the difficult ones too. Promises to raise children together, to make mistakes and forgive them, to hold each other accountable and to hold each other close. When they kissed, it wasn't the kind of kiss that marked a beginning. It was the kind that sealed something already built, slowly, painfully, and beautifully. Afterward, as the sun set and the garden glowed with a golden light, Liam and Samuel ran across the lawn, shouting with joy. Matteo stood watching them, his hand intertwined with Sophia's, his chest filled with a peace he never knew he was missing in his old life of boardrooms and silence. He once believed that success was about status, about achievements and money and reputation. But standing there, barefoot in a garden with the love of his life by his side, and his sons chasing butterflies in front of him, he finally understood what it truly meant. He was home. Completely. Finally. And this time, he wasn't going anywhere. What do you think is the ultimate message of Matteo and Sophia's story? What do you believe is the most important quality for building a strong and lasting relationship? Let us know in the comments. If this story of redemption and love moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more unforgettable stories.